The dining hall had gone completely silent, and every servant standing near the wall knew that silence in this house was more dangerous than shouting. Dominic Rossi sat at the head of the long table, staring down at a plate of food he had not touched. His fork rested untouched beside his hand. The chef who had prepared the meal stood a few steps away, sweat forming on his forehead, waiting for a verdict that never came kindly. "Take it away," Dominic said quietly. The chef swallowed hard. "Sir, if there is something wrong, I can prepare something else immediately." "There is nothing wrong with the dish," Dominic said, still not looking up. "There is something wrong with the fact that I asked for a simple meal, and instead, you gave me a performance. I did not ask for art. I asked for food." The chef opened his mouth, then closed it again, understanding that any further words would only make things worse. He picked up the plate with shaking hands and walked out of the hall, already knowing that his time in this house had ended. This was the 12th chef in less than a year. Word of the Rossi household had spread quietly among the finest kitchens in the region. Skilled cooks who once dreamed of working in a grand estate now hesitated when they heard the name Rossi mentioned. It was not the pay that frightened them, for the pay was generous beyond anything they could find elsewhere. It was the impossible standard, the quiet fury behind calm words, and the fact that no one could explain exactly what the master of the house was searching for. Rosa, the head housekeeper, had served the Rossi family for over 15 years. She was the only person in the household who dared speak to Dominic without trembling, though even she chose her words with care. That evening, after the 12th chef had packed his belongings and left without asking for his final payment, she found Dominic standing by the tall window in his study, looking out at the dark garden below. "Sir," she said gently, "we cannot keep losing chefs like this. The staff is beginning to talk. They say this house is cursed." "Let them talk," Dominic replied, his voice flat. "With respect, sir, talk becomes a problem when no one wants to work here anymore. Who will cook your meals next week? The week after?" Dominic did not answer immediately. He simply stared at the garden, at the neat rows of flowers that his mother had once planted with her own hands, long before the responsibilities of the family business had swallowed every gentle thing in his life. Rosa did not know what memory passed behind his eyes in that moment, but she recognized the tightening of his jaw, the same expression he wore whenever something touched a place he refused to acknowledge out loud. "Find someone," he said finally. "I do not care who. Just find someone before the week is over." Rosa nodded and left the study, already dreading the task ahead of her. Finding a chef willing to walk into this house was no longer simple, not after the stories had spread through the city like smoke through a closed room. 2 days later, in a small apartment on the edge of town, Elena Marchetti was folding the last of her clothes into a worn suitcase. She had lost her position at a small hotel just a week earlier, not because of any fault of her own, but because the owner had decided to shut down the business entirely. Elena was 26 years old, cheerful by nature, and remarkably unlucky when it came to timing. She had a habit of tripping over her own feet at the worst possible moments, spilling things she was certain she had been holding steady, and forgetting small details that always seemed to matter more than she expected. Her aunt, Clara, had called her the night before, with news of an opening. "It is a housekeeping position," Clara had said over the phone. "A large estate, very wealthy family. They pay well, and they need someone immediately. I already spoke to the woman in charge there. Her name is Rosa. She said you can start as soon as tomorrow." "What kind of family?" Elena had asked. "Does it matter? You need work, Elena. This is a good opportunity. Do not ask too many questions and do not be late." Elena had wanted to ask more, but exhaustion and the empty state of her bank account convinced her to accept without further hesitation. She had heard rumors about wealthy families in the city, families connected to businesses no one dared name directly, but she pushed the thought aside. She needed the work, and there was no room in her mind for fear when rent was due in 4 days. The estate, when she arrived early the next morning, was larger than anything she had ever seen up close. Tall iron gates stood at the entrance, guarded by 2 men who barely looked at her twice before waving her through once her name was confirmed on a list. The driveway curved through manicured gardens, leading to a stone house with tall windows and a heavy wooden door that looked as though it belonged in a much older century. Rosa met her at the entrance, offering a brief but warm smile. You must be Elena. Your aunt speaks highly of you. Thank you for the opportunity, Elena said, trying to hide her nervousness. I promise I will work hard. Good. We need hard workers here. Come, I will show you where you will be staying, and then I will explain your duties. Rosa led her through the grand hallways, past rooms filled with furniture that looked far too expensive to sit on comfortably, and up a narrow staircase to the servants' quarters on the upper floor. The room assigned to Elena was small but clean, with a single bed, a wooden dresser, and a window that looked out over the back gardens. You will be responsible for cleaning the east wing, Rosa explained. Bedrooms, hallways, the library. You are not to enter the west wing unless specifically asked. That area belongs to Mr. Rossi, and he values his privacy above all else. Mr. Rossi, Elena repeated. Is he the owner of the estate? He is the head of the household, Rosa said carefully, choosing her words. A very important man, a very busy man. You will rarely see him, and when you do, it is best to remain quiet and respectful. He does not tolerate carelessness. Something in Rosa's tone made Elena's stomach tighten slightly, but she nodded and said nothing further. She had worked for demanding employers before. She could manage one more. The first 2 days passed quietly. Elena cleaned the bedrooms with careful attention, dusted the shelves in the library, and polished the wooden floors until they shone under the afternoon light. She kept to herself, ate her meals with the other staff members in the small kitchen reserved for servants, and listened carefully whenever the other workers spoke about the household. It was during one of these meals that she first heard about the chefs. 12, said Marco, one of the groundskeepers, shaking his head as he ate. 12 chefs in less than a year. I have never seen anything like it. What happens to them? Elena asked, before she could stop herself. He fires them, said Lucia, one of the kitchen staff. Sometimes after one meal, sometimes after only a few days. No one knows what he is looking for. The food is always excellent, prepared by people who trained in the best kitchens in the country, but nothing satisfies him. Maybe he simply enjoys being difficult, Elena suggested. Maybe, Lucia said, though her tone suggested she did not believe it. But there is something strange about it. He does not shout. He does not throw things. He simply goes quiet, and that quiet is worse than any anger I have ever seen from another employer. Elena filed this information away, curious despite herself, though she had no reason to believe any of it would concern her directly. Her duties kept her far from the kitchen, and far from whatever tension existed between the master of the house and his revolving door of chefs. On the morning of her third day, everything changed. She woke earlier than usual, unable to sleep well in the unfamiliar bed, and made her way down to the kitchen hoping to find a quiet cup of tea before her duties began. The kitchen was empty at this hour, the counters clean, and waiting for the day's work to begin. Elena moved carefully, still adjusting to the layout of the large room, when she heard hurried footsteps approaching from the hallway. Rosa burst into the kitchen, her face pale, her usual composed expression replaced with something close to panic. The chef, Rosa said, breathing hard. He is gone. Gone where? Elena asked, setting down her cup. Gone. Left. He heard about the others, I suppose, and decided he did not want to risk being the 13th name on that list. He packed his things last night and left without telling anyone. Dinner is expected in less than 2 hours, and Mr. Rossi does not accept delays for any reason. Surely there is someone else who can cook, Elena said. There is no one else available on such short notice. I have already called every contact I know, and no one can arrive in time. Rosa pressed her palms against her forehead, clearly trying to think through a solution that did not seem to exist. This has never happened before. Usually there is at least a chef present, even if his food is dismissed. Tonight there will be nothing at all, and I do not know how he will react to that. Elena hesitated, watching Rosa's obvious distress, and something in her wanted to help despite having no real reason to involve herself in a problem that was not hers to solve. I can cook, Elena said quietly. Rosa looked up, startled. You are a maid, not a chef. I know, but I grew up cooking with my grandmother. It is nothing fancy, nothing like what a trained chef could prepare, but it is honest food. It might at least be something, rather than nothing at all. Rosa considered this for a long moment, clearly weighing the risk of presenting an untrained cook's meal against the certainty of presenting no meal whatsoever. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained tense. It is a risk, but we have no better option. What can you make in 2 hours? Something simple, Elena said. A pasta dish, with tomatoes, garlic, and fresh basil. The way my grandmother used to make it. It will not be fancy, but it will be good. Then make it, Rosa said. And Elena, please, do everything carefully. This is not the moment for mistakes. Elena nodded, already moving toward the pantry to check what ingredients were available. She was aware of the irony in Rosa's words, given her own history of small accidents and clumsy moments, but she pushed the thought aside. This was not the time for doubt. She found ripe tomatoes in the cold storage, fresh basil growing in small pots near the kitchen window, and a selection of dried pasta in the pantry shelves. She worked quickly but carefully, chopping garlic with practiced hands, letting the tomatoes soften slowly in olive oil while she brought a large pot of water to boil. The kitchen, usually a place of tension and pressure for the chefs who had come before her, felt different under Elena's hands. She moved with the same rhythm she remembered from her childhood, standing beside her grandmother in a small kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and fresh herbs. She hummed quietly to herself as she worked, focused entirely on the simple task in front of her, unaware of the immense weight this single meal would carry once it left her hands. By the time the pasta was ready, the sauce had reduced into something rich and fragrant, the tomatoes breaking down into a smooth base infused with garlic and fresh basil. Elena tasted it carefully, adjusting the salt, adding a touch more olive oil, until the flavor matched the memory she carried from years ago. Rosa appeared at the kitchen door, just as Elena was plating the dish onto simple white china. "This is it?" Rosa asked, eyeing the modest presentation with visible concern. No sauce drizzled artistically, no garnish arranged with precision. "It is simple food," Elena said. "Sometimes simple is enough." Rosa did not look convinced, but there was no time left to prepare anything else. She picked up the plate herself, her hands slightly unsteady, and carried it toward the dining hall where Dominic Rossi waited, unaware that tonight's meal had been prepared not by a trained chef, but by the new maid who had arrived only 3 days earlier. Elena remained in the kitchen, wiping down the counters and trying to calm the nervous energy that had settled into her chest. She told herself it did not matter what happened next. She had done her best with what she had, and whether the meal pleased him or not, she would still have her position as a maid the following morning. She did not yet know how wrong that assumption would prove to be, nor did she understand that a simple bowl of pasta was about to unravel years of carefully guarded silence inside a man the entire household feared. Minutes passed slowly in the empty kitchen. Elena busied herself with small tasks, trying not to think about the plate she had sent upstairs, trying not to imagine the reaction waiting on the other side of that closed dining hall door. She had faced difficult employers before, demanding guests who complained about every small detail, but something about the stories she had heard over the past 3 days made this situation feel different, heavier somehow, though she could not explain why. When she finally heard footsteps approaching the kitchen once again, quick and urgent, she braced herself for the worst, certain that Rosa was returning to inform her that her brief time in this house had come to an end before it had truly begun. But Rosa did not look angry when she entered the kitchen. Instead, her expression carried something closer to confusion, as though she had witnessed an event she could not fully explain. "He wants to see you," Rosa said. Elena's stomach dropped. "Me? Is something wrong with the food?" "I do not know what is wrong or right," Rosa said, still catching her breath. "He finished the entire plate. He has never finished a plate before, not once in the past year. And now he is asking who prepared it, and he wants that person brought to him immediately." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she untied her apron. She had imagined many outcomes for this evening, but being summoned directly to the man everyone in the household feared was not one she had prepared herself for. "Should I change my clothes first?" she asked, glancing down at her simple work uniform. "There is no time," Rosa said. "Come now, before his patience runs out." They walked together through the long hallways of the estate, Elena's footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. She noticed how the household seemed to hold its breath around her, servants pausing in doorways to watch her pass, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and quiet worry. By the time they reached the tall doors of the dining hall, Elena's heart was pounding loud enough that she was certain Rosa could hear it beside her. Rosa knocked once, then pushed the door open just enough for Elena to step inside before closing it behind her, leaving Elena alone in the vast room with the man she had heard so much about, but never once seen with her own eyes. Dominic Rossi sat at the head of the long table, the empty plate still in front of him. He was younger than Elena had expected, though the weight in his eyes suggested a man who carried far more years of experience than his face revealed. His dark hair was neatly combed, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, and his expression unreadable as he studied her with quiet intensity. "You prepared this?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Yes, sir," Elena said, standing as straight as she could manage despite the nervous energy running through her body. "I apologize if it was not what you expected. Our chef left unexpectedly, and I did not want you to go without a meal." "Sit down," Dominic said. Elena blinked, uncertain she had heard him correctly. "Sir?" "Sit down," he repeated, gesturing to the chair nearest to him. "I have questions, and I would rather not have this conversation with you standing there, like you are about to run from the room." Elena hesitated only a moment before lowering herself carefully into the chair, keeping her hands folded in her lap. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Dominic asked. "My grandmother taught me," Elena said. "She raised me for much of my childhood. She did not have much money, so she learned to make wonderful meals from very simple ingredients. I used to stand beside her in the kitchen every evening, and she taught me everything she knew." "This dish," Dominic said, glancing down at the empty plate, "it tastes exactly like something I remember from a long time ago. I have not tasted anything like it in many years." Elena did not know how to respond to this, so she remained quiet, watching him carefully. "I have hired 12 chefs in the past year," Dominic continued, "each one more skilled than the last, trained in kitchens across the country, capable of preparing dishes I could never begin to describe, and not one of them managed what you did tonight, with nothing more than tomatoes, garlic, and pasta." "I am glad you enjoyed it," Elena said carefully. "Enjoyed is not the right word," Dominic said, his voice growing quieter. "This meal reminded me of someone I have not thought about in a very long time. That is not something I expected to feel again, and certainly not from a simple bowl of pasta prepared by a maid." Elena remained silent, sensing that whatever memory he was referring to was not something he intended to explain further, at least not tonight. "I would like you to prepare my meals from now on," Dominic said. "Not as a chef, not officially, but for as long as you remain in this house, you will cook for me. Rosa will adjust your duties accordingly." "Sir, I am not trained as a chef," Elena said, genuinely startled by the request. "I only know simple recipes, the kind my grandmother taught me. I would not know how to prepare the complicated dishes you are accustomed to." "I do not want complicated dishes," Dominic said, his tone sharpening slightly, though not with anger. "I have had enough of complicated. I want simple, honest food, the kind you made tonight. Can you manage that?" Elena considered the request carefully. Part of her wanted to refuse, wary of the strange intensity in his voice and the reputation that surrounded this house. But another part of her, the part that still remembered standing beside her grandmother in a warm kitchen filled with laughter, felt a pull toward the opportunity in front of her. "I can manage that," she said finally. "Good," Dominic said, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "You will begin tomorrow. Rosa will show you to the main kitchen and provide whatever ingredients you require." Elena nodded, rising slowly from her chair, uncertain whether she had just been given a promotion or invited into something far more complicated than she understood. As she reached the door, Dominic spoke once more, his voice quieter than before. "Elena," he said, and she paused, surprised that he already knew her name. "Thank you for tonight's meal." She turned back briefly, meeting his eyes for the first time since entering the room, and saw something there she had not expected to find in a man so widely feared throughout the household. It was not cruelty, and it was not the cold command she had witnessed moments earlier. It was something closer to loneliness, carefully hidden beneath layers of control, visible only for a brief moment before he looked away again. "You are welcome, sir," she said softly, then left the room, closing the door quietly behind her. Rosa was waiting anxiously in the hallway, her eyes wide with questions she clearly wanted to ask immediately. "Well?" Rosa said. "What happened? What did he say?" "He wants me to cook for him," Elena said, still trying to process the conversation herself. "Starting tomorrow." Rosa's mouth fell open slightly. "He wants you to be his chef?" "He said not officially, just that I should cook his meals for as long as I remain here. In 15 years of working in this house, I have never seen anything like this," Rosa said, shaking her head slowly. "You should be careful, Elena. Mr. Rossi does not open himself to people easily, and when he does, it means something. I do not know what it means in your case, but it means something." "I only made him a simple dinner," Elena said, though even as she spoke the words, she understood that something larger than a simple dinner had happened in that room. The following morning, Elena reported to the main kitchen as instructed, feeling out of place among the gleaming appliances and expensive equipment that had once belonged to trained professionals, far more skilled than herself. Rosa walked her through the pantry, showing her where various ingredients were stored, and explained that fresh deliveries arrived daily from local markets, ensuring she would always have quality produce to work with. "He usually eats breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, and dinner at 7, Rosa explained. "He does not like to be kept waiting, but he also does not expect elaborate meals. Keep things simple, as he requested, and you should be fine." Elena nodded, absorbing the information carefully. She spent the morning preparing a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, presenting it exactly on time at 8 o'clock. When Rosa returned the empty tray later that morning, she reported that Dominic had eaten everything without complaint, a small victory that eased some of Elena's nervousness. Over the following days, a quiet routine began to form. Elena woke early each morning to prepare breakfast, spent her afternoons planning and preparing lunch and dinner, and slowly began to feel more comfortable in the large kitchen that had intimidated her on her first day. She experimented carefully with recipes from her childhood: simple soups, roasted vegetables, grilled meats seasoned with fresh herbs, always keeping the dishes honest and uncomplicated, just as Dominic had requested. She did not see him often during those first days. Meals were delivered by other staff members, and any feedback came secondhand through Rosa, or brief notes left on the returned trays. But gradually, small changes began to appear. A note thanking her for a particularly good soup. A request for a dish she had mentioned once in passing to another staff member, apparently repeated to him through channels she did not fully understand. Small signs that the man at the center of this vast, tense household was paying closer attention to her than she had initially realized. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after that first unexpected dinner, Elena was preparing a simple roasted chicken when she heard footsteps approaching the kitchen. Footsteps that did not belong to any of the household staff she had grown familiar with. She turned from the stove, wiping her hands on her apron, and found Dominic Rossi standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Sir," she said, startled, "I did not expect you here. Is something wrong with the meals?" "Nothing is wrong," he said, stepping into the kitchen slowly, his eyes moving across the counters, filled with fresh vegetables and simmering pots. "I wanted to see where the food comes from. I have not stepped into this kitchen in years." "You are welcome to stay, if you would like," Elena said, though uncertainty colored her voice. "I am only preparing dinner. Nothing particularly interesting to watch." "I disagree," Dominic said, moving closer to the counter, where she worked, studying the chicken roasting in the oven with quiet curiosity. "There is something interesting about watching someone create a meal without pretense, without trying to impress anyone. Every chef I have hired before you cooked as though I were judging a competition. You cook as though you are feeding someone you care about." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks at his words, uncertain how to respond to such an observation from a man she barely knew. "I suppose that is simply how my grandmother taught me," she said finally. "Food was never about impressing anyone in our house. It was about taking care of the people you loved." Something shifted in Dominic's expression at these words, a flicker of memory crossing his features before he masked it once again behind his usual composed demeanor. "That is a good way to think about it," he said quietly. Then, After a brief pause, he added, "Would you mind if I stayed a while longer? I find I have little else to occupy my evening." Elena glanced at him, surprised by the request, but unwilling to refuse. "Of course, sir. You are welcome to stay." He pulled a stool from the corner of the kitchen and sat near the counter, watching as she continued her work, occasionally asking small questions about the ingredients she used or the techniques her grandmother had taught her. Elena found herself relaxing slightly as the conversation continued, the tension she usually associated with his presence slowly easing into something closer to comfortable familiarity. Neither of them could have predicted, in that quiet kitchen filled with the warm smell of roasting chicken and fresh herbs, how significantly their lives were about to become intertwined, nor how much both of them still had left to reveal about the paths that had brought them to this unlikely moment together. The visits to the kitchen became a habit neither of them spoke about directly, yet both seemed to expect. Nearly every evening, while Elena prepared dinner, Dominic would appear in the doorway, sometimes staying only a few minutes, other times remaining until the meal was finished and served. Rosa noticed the change immediately, though she said nothing to Elena about it, choosing instead to watch quietly from a distance, unsure what to make of the shift taking place within the household she had served for so many years. One evening, as Elena chopped fresh vegetables for a simple soup, Dominic asked a question that caught her completely off guard. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "What kind of business my family runs?" Elena paused, knife still in hand, considering how honestly to answer. "I have heard things," she admitted. "The other staff talk sometimes. I do not know the details, and I have not asked." "Most people in this city know exactly what my family does," Dominic said, his voice carrying a weight she had not heard from him before. "They know, and they either fear us or try to use that fear to their advantage. You are the first person in a long time who has looked at me without either reaction." "Should I be afraid?" Elena asked, meeting his eyes directly. Dominic considered the question for a long moment before answering. "I would understand if you were, but I have never given you a reason to be, and I do not intend to start now." "Then I am not afraid," Elena said simply, returning her attention to the vegetables in front of her. Dominic watched her for a moment longer, something unreadable passing behind his eyes, before he spoke again, his voice softer than before. "My mother used to cook like this," he said. "Simple meals, nothing fancy. She died when I was young, before I understood how much those quiet evenings in the kitchen meant. After she was gone, everything in this house became about performance. Impressing guests, intimidating rivals, proving strength through excess. I forgot what a simple meal was supposed to feel like, until you arrived." Elena set down her knife, turning to face him fully. "I am sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago," Dominic said, though the tightness in his jaw suggested the loss still carried weight after all these years. "I do not often speak about her. I am not entirely certain why I am telling you now. Perhaps because it has been a long time since anyone gave you the chance to," Elena offered gently. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, something in his expression softening in a way Elena had not witnessed before. "Perhaps," he agreed quietly. Over the following weeks, these evening conversations became a regular part of their routine. Dominic revealed pieces of himself slowly, cautiously, as though testing whether Elena's reaction would change with each new piece of information. He spoke of the responsibilities placed on his shoulders far too young, of a father who taught him control was more valuable than kindness, of years spent building walls around himself so thick that even his closest associates rarely saw past them. Elena, in turn, shared stories of her own childhood, of the grandmother who raised her after her parents struggled to provide, of the small kitchen where she learned that love could be expressed through something as simple as a shared meal. She spoke of her dreams, modest as they were, of one day perhaps owning a small restaurant of her own, nothing grand, just a place where people could come and feel cared for through good, honest food. "You should pursue that dream," Dominic told her one evening, as she prepared a simple dessert of baked fruit and honey. "You have a gift. It would be a waste to spend your entire life cleaning bedrooms and cooking for someone like me." "I do not consider it a waste," Elena said. "I have never enjoyed my work more than I have these past weeks." Dominic looked at her carefully, as though trying to determine whether she meant those words sincerely or simply spoke them out of politeness. Whatever he found in her expression seemed to satisfy him, because he did not question her further, though something in his posture relaxed slightly, as though her words had eased a worry he had not voiced aloud. Word of the strange friendship forming between the master of the house and his new cook eventually spread through the staff, as such things inevitably do in households where everyone lives and works in close proximity. Some of the servants viewed the development with quiet approval, noting that Dominic seemed less tense, less prone to the cold silences that had once filled every corner of the estate. Others viewed it with concern, worried about what might happen if this unusual arrangement ever reached the attention of the wider world beyond the estate's tall iron gates. Marco, the groundskeeper, mentioned his concerns to Elena one afternoon as she gathered fresh herbs from the small garden behind the kitchen. "Be careful," he said, glancing around to make certain no one else could hear their conversation. "The people connected to this family's business do not always approve of personal attachments. If certain individuals learn that Mr. Rossi has grown close to someone outside the usual circles, it could create problems, both for you and for him." "What kind of problems?" Elena asked, unease settling in her stomach. "The kind that follow families like his," Marco said carefully. "There are people who watch this house closely, looking for weaknesses to exploit. A personal attachment, especially one as visible as what has developed between you and Mr. Rossi, could become exactly the kind of weakness they are searching for." Elena considered his words carefully, understanding the warning behind them, even as she struggled to reconcile it with the gentle, thoughtful man who had begun sharing his evenings with her in the quiet kitchen. "Does Mr. Rossi know about these dangers?" she asked. "Better than anyone," Marco said, "which is precisely why I find it strange that he continues visiting you so openly. He has spent years guarding himself against exactly this kind of vulnerability. Something about you must matter to him a great deal, for him to risk it now." That evening, as Elena prepared dinner, she found herself watching Dominic more carefully than usual, searching for signs of the danger Marco had described, though nothing in his calm demeanor suggested any awareness of impending trouble. "You seem distracted tonight," Dominic observed, noticing the slight furrow in her brow as she stirred a simmering pot of stew. "Marco mentioned something to me today," Elena admitted, deciding honesty was the better path forward. "He said that people connected to your family's business might view our friendship as a weakness, something dangerous for both of us." Dominic's expression grew serious, though he did not appear surprised by the warning. "Marco is not wrong to be concerned," he said. "There are people in this world who would happily use any connection I have against me, given the chance. It has always been this way, even before you arrived." "Then perhaps it would be safer if we kept some distance," Elena suggested, though the words felt heavier leaving her mouth than she had expected. "Is that what you want?" Dominic asked, his voice quiet but direct. Elena hesitated, surprised by how difficult the question proved to answer honestly. "No," she admitted finally. "It is not what I want, but I do not wish to become a source of danger for you, or for myself." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, considering her words carefully before responding. "I have spent my entire life building walls to protect myself from exactly this kind of vulnerability," he said. "And for years, it worked. I felt nothing, risked nothing, and lost nothing, because there was nothing left inside me capable of being taken. Then you arrived with a simple bowl of pasta, and everything I built began to crumble." "I did not intend to cause you any trouble," Elena said softly. "I know," Dominic said, "and that is precisely why I do not regret it, despite the risks. I would rather feel something again, even with the danger that comes attached to it, than continue living the way I have for the past decade." Elena did not know how to respond to such an admission, so she simply nodded, understanding that whatever was forming between them had grown beyond something either of them could easily walk away from, regardless of the risks Marco had warned her about. Over the following weeks, their bond continued deepening, despite the quiet warnings circulating among the household staff. Dominic began requesting Elena's presence, for reasons beyond simply preparing meals, asking her opinion on small household decisions, inviting her to join him for quiet walks through the estate's expansive gardens, once her kitchen duties were finished for the day. During one such walk, beneath the soft glow of evening light filtering through tall trees, Dominic stopped near a small stone bench positioned at the center of the garden, the same garden Elena had once noticed his mother had planted many years earlier. "My mother used to sit here every evening," he said quietly. "Before everything changed, before I understood what our family truly did, before I inherited responsibilities I never asked for. This garden is the only place on this entire estate that still feels like it belongs to her memory, rather than to the business my father built." "It is beautiful," Elena said, looking around at the carefully maintained flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. "I can understand why you would want to preserve it." "I have not shared this place with anyone in years," Dominic admitted. "Not since she passed away. I do not entirely know why I am sharing it with you now, except that something about you makes me want to remember the person I was before all of this. Before the walls, before the silence." Elena reached out gently, placing her hand over his on the stone bench, a simple gesture that carried more weight than either of them fully understood in that quiet moment. Dominic looked down at her hand, then up into her eyes, something shifting behind his gaze that spoke of years of loneliness finally beginning to ease. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Elena said softly. "Thank you for giving me a reason to remember what trust feels like," Dominic replied. Neither of them noticed, in that peaceful moment beneath the evening sky, the figure watching quietly from beyond the garden's outer wall, taking careful note of the closeness developing between the notoriously guarded head of the Rossi household and the young woman who had entered his life so unexpectedly. This information, gathered patiently over several visits, would soon find its way into hands that intended to use it for purposes far removed from anything resembling kindness or understanding. The figure who had watched from beyond the garden wall was a man named Victor Hale, a business rival who had spent years searching for any advantage against the Rossi family. Victor had built his own fortune through methods similar to those of the Rossi household, and for years the two families had maintained an uneasy peace, each too powerful to challenge the other directly, without significant risk to themselves. Victor had grown tired of this arrangement. He wanted more than an uneasy peace. He wanted control over territories currently held by the Rossi family, and he had spent months searching for a weakness he could exploit to shift the balance permanently in his favor. When one of his associates reported unusual activity at the Rossi estate, mentioning a young woman who had become unusually close to Dominic Rossi himself, Victor recognized immediately the opportunity he had been searching for. "Find out everything about her," Victor instructed his associate, a quiet man named Adrian, who had proven useful in gathering information over the years. "Where she came from, who her family is, what she means to him. If Dominic Rossi has finally found something he cares about, then I have finally found something I can use against him." Adrian spent the following days gathering information carefully, discovering details about Elena's background, her Aunt Clara, the small apartment she had left behind, and the modest life she had lived before arriving at the Rossi estate. None of this information suggested any particular danger to Victor's plans, but it confirmed what he needed to know. Elena Marchetti had no powerful connections, no family capable of protecting her, nothing standing between her and whatever plan Victor decided to pursue. Meanwhile, unaware of the danger gathering around her, Elena continued her quiet life within the estate, her days filled with the comfortable routine of preparing meals and spending increasingly meaningful evenings in Dominic's company. Their relationship had grown beyond anything either of them had expected when Elena first arrived at the estate weeks earlier, evolving from a simple employer and employee arrangement into something neither of them had experienced before in their respective lives. Rosa, watching this development with a mixture of happiness and concern, decided one afternoon to speak with Elena directly, feeling a responsibility to ensure the young woman understood the full weight of what she had become involved in. "I have watched Mr. Rossi for 15 years, Rosa said, finding Elena in the kitchen garden, gathering fresh herbs for the evening meal. "I have never seen him as content as he has become since your arrival. But contentment in this family often comes with a price, and I worry you do not fully understand what that price might be." "I understand there are dangers," Elena said carefully. "Marco has already warned me about people who might view our friendship as a weakness." It is more than that, Rosa said, her voice growing quieter, more serious. The business Mr. Rossi's family conducts involves powerful people, dangerous people, individuals who have spent years searching for any opportunity to gain advantage over the Rossi family. If any of these individuals learn how much you mean to him, they will not hesitate to use that knowledge against both of you. What should I do? Elena asked, genuine worry creeping into her voice for the first time. I do not know, Rosa admitted honestly. I only know that you should be careful. More careful than you have been. Trust your instincts. And if anything ever feels wrong, tell someone immediately. Do not try to handle danger alone in this house. There are people here who care about your safety, myself included. Elena thanked Rosa for her honesty, though the conversation left a lingering unease that followed her through the rest of the day, a quiet worry she found difficult to shake, despite her attempts to focus on her usual tasks. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Dominic noticed the tension in her movements immediately. Something is troubling you, he observed, watching her chop vegetables with slightly more force than necessary. Rosa spoke with me today, Elena admitted, about the dangers connected to your family's business, about people who might try to use our friendship against us. Dominic set down the glass of water he had been holding, his expression growing serious. Rosa is not wrong to worry. I have enemies, Elena, powerful ones, individuals who have spent years searching for any weakness they could exploit. I have tried to protect you by keeping our friendship quiet, but I am beginning to understand that quiet is not the same as safe. What are you saying? Elena asked, setting down her knife entirely now, giving him her full attention. I am saying that I should have been more careful, Dominic said, running a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena had come to recognize as a sign of genuine worry beneath his usually composed exterior. I allowed myself to become close to you, without fully considering the danger that closeness might create. That was selfish of me, and I am sorry for placing you at risk. You did not force this friendship upon me, Elena said gently. I chose to spend time with you just as much as you chose to spend time with me. Whatever risk exists, we share it together. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, something like gratitude and worry mixing together behind his eyes. I will increase security around the estate, he said finally, and I will ask that you avoid leaving the property alone until I am certain no immediate threat exists. I know this restricts your freedom, and I am sorry for that, but I would rather keep you safe than risk anything happening to you. Elena nodded, understanding the seriousness in his voice, though a small part of her wondered how long these precautions might need to last, and whether the quiet life she had begun building within these walls could survive the danger now surrounding it. Over the following days, Elena noticed subtle changes throughout the estate. More guards patrolled the grounds than she remembered seeing before. Marco mentioned that additional security cameras had been installed along the outer walls. Rosa seemed more watchful than usual, checking regularly to ensure Elena remained within the safety of the main house, rather than wandering the gardens alone as she had grown accustomed to doing. Despite these precautions, Dominic continued visiting the kitchen each evening, unwilling to sacrifice the quiet moments they shared together, despite the growing danger surrounding their friendship. Elena found comfort in his continued presence, even as worry settled deeper into her chest with each passing day. One evening, nearly a week after Rosa's warning, Elena received an unexpected visitor at the estate's kitchen entrance. A young woman named Isabel, claiming to represent a local market that supplied fresh produce to the estate, requested a brief meeting to discuss upcoming deliveries. Elena, seeing nothing unusual about the request, agreed to speak with her near the kitchen garden. I understand you have become quite close to Mr. Rossi, Isabel said, once they were alone among the herb beds, her tone carrying an edge Elena had not expected from a simple delivery representative. I am not sure that concerns your business here, Elena said carefully, sensing something was not right about this conversation. It concerns my employer a great deal, Isabel said, her friendly demeanor slipping away entirely, replaced by something colder, more calculated. My employer believes you might be persuaded to share certain information about Mr. Rossi's activities, his schedule, his security arrangements. In exchange, you would be compensated quite generously, more than you could ever earn cooking meals in this kitchen. Elena's heart began racing as she understood the true purpose behind this visit. I do not know anything about Mr. Rossi's business activities, she said firmly. And even if I did, I would never betray his trust for any amount of money. That is unfortunate, Isabel said, her voice growing quieter, more threatening. Because my employer does not respond well to refusal. You should consider your position carefully, Elena. This is not a request you can simply decline without consequence. Are you threatening me? Elena asked, though fear made her voice tremble slightly despite her attempt to remain composed. I am offering you a choice, Isabel said, stepping closer. Cooperate, and you will be compensated fairly. Refuse, and my employer will find other ways to obtain the information he needs, ways that may prove far less pleasant for everyone involved, including you. Before Elena could respond further, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their conversation. Marco appeared from around the corner of the garden, his expression immediately shifting to alarm as he took in the tense scene before him. Elena, is everything all right? He called out, moving quickly toward them. Isabel stepped back smoothly, her expression returning to its earlier pleasant demeanor, as though the threatening conversation had never occurred. Just discussing delivery schedules, she said lightly. I should be going now. Thank you for your time, Elena. She walked away quickly, disappearing through the garden gate before Marco could question her further, leaving Elena standing among the herb beds, her hands trembling as the full weight of the encounter settled over her. What happened? Marco asked, concern evident in his voice. You look pale. She was not here about deliveries, Elena said quietly, still trying to process the threat she had just received. Someone sent her to threaten me, to try to get information about Mr. Rossi. I need to speak with him immediately. Marco nodded quickly, understanding the seriousness of the situation without requiring further explanation. Come, I will take you to him right now. They found Dominic in his study, reviewing documents at his desk, and the moment he saw Elena's expression, he rose immediately from his chair, his own expression shifting to alarm. What happened? He asked, closing the distance between them quickly. Elena recounted the conversation with Isabel as steadily as she could manage, describing the threats and the implied danger behind them. Dominic's expression grew increasingly serious as she spoke, a familiar coldness returning to his features, though Elena understood now that this coldness came from genuine fear for her safety, rather than the cruelty the household staff had once whispered about. This confirms what I feared, Dominic said once she finished, his voice tight with controlled anger. Victor Hale has learned about our friendship and intends to use it against me. I should have anticipated this sooner. Who is Victor Hale? Elena asked. A rival, Dominic said. A man who has spent years searching for any advantage over my family's business. He is dangerous, Elena. More dangerous than I have allowed myself to fully explain to you until now. What does he want? Elena asked, though she suspected she already understood the answer. He wants to weaken my position, to gain leverage he can use against me, Dominic said, and he has clearly decided that you represent the easiest path toward that goal. He paused, running a hand through his hair, the worry in his expression deepening. I need to ensure your safety immediately. I cannot risk anything happening to you because of my own carelessness in allowing this friendship to become visible to my enemies. What will you do? Elena asked, fear and uncertainty coloring her voice. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, determination, replacing some of the worry in his expression. Whatever is necessary, he said quietly. I will not allow Victor Hale, or anyone else, to harm you because of your connection to me. That night, Dominic called an urgent meeting with the most trusted members of his household staff and business associates, gathering them in his study to discuss the threat that had emerged against Elena's safety. Rosa and Marco attended, along with two men Elena had rarely seen before, quiet, serious individuals who managed the more complicated aspects of the family's business affairs. Victor Hale believes he has found a weakness he can exploit, Dominic explained to the gathered group. He is mistaken. What he has found is a reason for me to finally address a threat I have allowed to linger for far too long. What do you propose, sir? One of the men asked. Victor has built his influence through a combination of intimidation and carefully hidden financial arrangements, many of which would not withstand scrutiny from the proper authorities, Dominic said. I have avoided exposing these arrangements in the past, because doing so risked drawing unwanted attention to my own family's affairs. That calculation has now changed. You intend to expose him? Rosa asked, surprise evident in her voice. I intend to ensure that Victor Hale understands the consequences of threatening someone under my protection, Dominic said firmly. I have spent years gathering information about his business dealings, information I never intended to use because it would have escalated tensions between our families unnecessarily. Given his recent actions, I no longer feel obligated to show that restraint. Over the following days, Dominic worked closely with his associates, carefully compiling evidence of Victor Hale's more questionable financial dealings, information gathered patiently over years but never previously acted upon. Rather than responding to Victor's threat with an equally threatening confrontation, Dominic chose a different path, one that would neutralize the danger without escalating the conflict into something more dangerous for everyone involved. He arranged a private meeting with several influential business leaders in the city, individuals who had long suspected Victor Hale's questionable practices but lacked concrete evidence to act against him. Dominic presented the information he had gathered, carefully, methodically, demonstrating exactly how Victor had built his fortune through methods that would not survive proper scrutiny. Word spread quickly through the city's business circles following this meeting. Victor Hale found himself increasingly isolated, his usual associates distancing themselves from him as rumors of his questionable dealings began circulating widely. Within days, several of his business partnerships collapsed entirely, his influence crumbling far more quickly than he had ever anticipated when he first decided to target Dominic Rossi's household. Adrian, the associate who had gathered information about Elena on Victor's behalf, arrived at the Rossi estate one morning, requesting an urgent meeting with Dominic himself. Mr. Hale wishes to discuss a resolution, Adrian said, his earlier confidence noticeably diminished. He recognizes that continuing this conflict serves no one's interests. Tell your employer, Dominic said calmly, that I have no further interest in conflict, provided he understands clearly that any future attempt to threaten anyone connected to my household will result in consequences far more severe than what he has already experienced. Adrian nodded quickly, understanding the seriousness behind Dominic's calm words. I will relay your message, he said, before departing the estate quickly, clearly relieved to be finished with his role in this failed scheme. Elena, who had remained largely unaware of the specific details of how Dominic resolved the threat against her, learned about the situation slowly over the following days, piecing together information from careful conversations with Rosa and occasional explanations from Dominic himself. Is it truly finished? She asked him one evening, as they sat together in the garden near his mother's carefully maintained flowers. Victor Hale no longer poses any threat to your safety, Dominic confirmed. His influence has diminished significantly, and he understands clearly the consequences of any future attempt to target you or anyone else connected to this household. I am glad this is over, Elena said, relief evident in her voice. I was frightened, more frightened than I wanted to admit. I am sorry you were placed in that position, Dominic said, taking her hand gently in his own. I should have recognized the danger sooner, and taken steps to protect you before it became necessary. You protected me when it mattered, Elena said. That is what matters most. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, something settling in his expression that Elena had not seen before, a kind of peace that seemed entirely new to him. I have spent so many years building walls around myself, believing that caring about anyone would only create vulnerability, only invite danger into my life, he said quietly. These past weeks have taught me something different. Caring about you has not weakened me. It has given me a reason to become someone better than the man I was before you arrived. You were already a good man, Elena said softly. Beneath everything else, beneath the walls and the reputation, I saw that from the very first evening we spoke together. Few people have ever looked at me and seen anything beyond what my family's business represents, Dominic said. You saw something different from the very beginning, and I do not intend to let that go, regardless of whatever dangers might exist in the future. As the weeks continued passing, life within the Rossi estate settled into a new, more peaceful rhythm. The household staff, having witnessed the resolution of the threat against Elena, seemed to relax considerably, the earlier tension that had characterized daily life within the estate, gradually easing into something calmer, more content. Rosa noticed the change most clearly of all, watching as Dominic began smiling more frequently, engaging more openly with staff members he had once addressed only with cold formality. The 12 chefs who had come and gone throughout the previous year became a distant memory, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of watching Elena continue preparing simple, honest meals that brought genuine comfort to the man who had once seemed incapable of finding contentment in anything at all. Elena, for her part, found herself settling into a life she had never anticipated when she first arrived at the estate, desperate for any employment opportunity that could pay her rent. The small kitchen that had once intimidated her with its unfamiliar equipment and expensive appliances had become a place of genuine comfort, a space where she felt valued not for her ability to perform elaborate techniques, but simply for the honest care she brought to every meal she prepared. One evening, months after that first unexpected dinner that had changed everything, Dominic invited Elena to join him once again on the stone bench within his mother's garden, the same quiet spot where he had first shared memories of his childhood many weeks earlier. "I have been thinking about your dream," he said, as they sat together beneath the soft evening light. "The small restaurant you once mentioned, the place where people could come and feel cared for through good food." "It was only a modest dream," Elena said, smiling slightly at the memory of sharing such a personal hope with him. "Nothing I expected to actually pursue anytime soon." "I would like to help you pursue it," Dominic said, "if you are willing to accept that help." Elena looked at him, surprised by the offer. "You do not need to do that," she said. "I am content here, cooking for you, living within this household." "I know you are content," Dominic said gently. "But I have watched you find joy in the simple act of caring for people through food, and I believe you deserve the opportunity to share that gift more widely, if that is truly what you want. I am not offering this out of obligation, Elena. I am offering it because I care about your happiness, and because I believe you have something special to share with this city beyond these walls." Elena considered his words carefully, understanding the sincerity behind them, though uncertainty remained about what such a change might mean for the life they had built together within these gardens and this quiet kitchen. "I do not wish to leave," she said finally. "Whatever restaurant might exist someday, I would want it to remain connected to this life, not separate from it." "Then perhaps we find a way to build both," Dominic said, a genuine smile crossing his features, an expression Elena had come to treasure, precisely because it appeared so rarely in the early days of their friendship. "A place of your own, close enough that this house remains part of your daily life, close enough that these evenings in the garden do not need to end." Elena smiled, reaching for his hand across the stone bench, feeling a warmth settle through her that had nothing to do with the mild evening air surrounding them. "I would like that very much," she said. As the sun continued setting behind the carefully maintained gardens his mother had once tended with her own hands, Dominic Rossi understood, perhaps for the first time in many years, that strength did not always require walls, and that the fiercest protection sometimes grew from the gentlest beginnings. A simple bowl of pasta, prepared by a clumsy, kind-hearted maid who had never intended to change anyone's life, had somehow become the beginning of everything that mattered most to him now. The household that had once trembled at the mention of his name began, slowly and quietly, to become something different, something warmer, guided not by fear, but by the simple understanding that even the most guarded hearts could find their way back toward gentleness, given enough patience, enough honesty, and one very simple, very honest meal.